today's guest, André, CTO of Trusted Shops.
If you do it right, you have a setup which allows you to really go full force with one team without affecting the others, which means, like, let's take your case, right? VC comes in and says, I want to have that feature. Hopefully your organization is, or maybe your organization is already capable fulfilling this request without stopping like the entire product development, like reshuffling everything and then starting just to deliver that feature. Maybe you are already in a shape that you can deliver that without that many dependencies, right? So I think that could be a benefit of such an organization. And the second is, if you're not in that shape and you strongly believe like this is the way to go, you could also not easily, but at least with less effort, adapt the organization. So that's definitely a strong argument for such organizational styles.
André and I talked about the concept of progressive organizations, network organizations, and his perspective as a CTO is super insightful on how he thinks about systems and an organization or teams overall in different systems and subsystems. And therefore, we talked about the role of managers versus leaders, and also what the difference in working within the system or a system and on the system looks like. So a quite insightful episode, especially when you are in a tech org or looking for some inspiration from engineering or tech leaders.
Then you can build trust, and then you can spend less time communicating and more time just getting shit done.
Then I went home and thought about this sentence.
We basically put it on the table.
Hiring takes time. People are trained.
How to objectively judge certain situations.
It's very, 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 very hard to change things.
That was the learning.
Entrepreneurs with empathy.
To the people side.
Okay, André, great to have you here, because I think we met in the LinkedIn feed in some comments of I think previous podcast videos of mine, right?
That's true. Thanks for having me, Thomas.
Yeah, it's great that you were so responsive and that we just started an open discussion. And now we are here talking about tech leadership and how progressive orgs can look like. But maybe first of all, we start with a short introduction about yourself.
Sure. Let me introduce. So yeah, like what can I share? Like let's start that I discovered during my childhood the interest for computers, not that much in gaming, but like how like PCs work at all. So I decided then to start studying informatics, joined as a software engineer, fell in love with the startup ecosystem here in Berlin, and then like moved on from like different individual contributor roles towards leadership roles, worked for different companies, different sizes, and like made some career, and actually serving since nearly 10 years now as a CTO for different companies. Like worked for Immobilien Scout, DHL, worked for Mr. Specs, Smava, and at the moment I'm serving as a CTO for Trusted Shops.
Okay, and when you are in an organization that is a bit, let's say, on the lower side of what you just mentioned in terms of range versus on the bigger side, what different patterns do you see, and what do you do as a leader when entering a team size like that to understand, okay, how should an org maybe need to look like that it's progressive in a certain way, or that you would think, yeah, I can work with that?
Yeah. Like on the first part of your question, I would say like smaller teams require less structure, right? So if you go for larger teams, you need to ensure, right, that you like really based on the goals and like, so your overall goal, what you want to accomplish as a company, what you want to achieve, like you maybe need to have like bit different structures, more maybe giving a bit more guidance. And with smaller organizations, that could be actually easier, but also has its downsides, right? If a small organization, you cannot afford everything. So that's definitely something to consider. And regarding the second part of the question, like how do I start? Well, like for me, organizations are a system, right? This is all like I always, when I talk about organizations, I always think in systems, and there are different ways to visualize, so to say, or to structure a system. One could be like classic hierarchies, right? Like from my point of view, these are a bit outdated. So like there is a reason why they exist, like for certain topics that absolutely make sense. But if we talk about knowledge work, and software engineering or product engineering, product development is for sure knowledge work, I try to structure it differently. So I'm a big fan of like the network organizations, and to come up with a good approach, you actually need to understand the system, right? So you need to understand what is the domain, what kind of dependencies exist, like do dependencies exist on a technical level, which would be fine, right? Because you can expose interfaces between system components, or do you have dependencies between teams? And like there's probably no organization where you can say like there is no dependency on organizational level. You just need to ensure, right, that you're getting rid of the toxic ones. And then if you follow that approach, right, you end up with a network organization.
And what could be toxic in terms of dependencies in your opinion?
Yeah, toxic is like if you see like the same dependencies all the times, right? So I think it's like if you compare that to bad project management, right? You work on a project, you did some learnings, and like you do not apply them at the next project. So if you see like dependencies between two teams all the time, right, and like this really slows down one team, you should question that, right? And maybe, right, that's still like a valid approach, right? Where you say, okay, like this team like has some special knowledge. For example, if you think about team topologies, right? Like you have the idea of a complex subsystem team, right? So for that reason, there could be a dependency, right? Because like the knowledge you need to have to build a certain system, right? Like you need to centralize it because like it's hard to like bring this into all teams. For that reason, like dependency could be fine. But if it's just like normal stuff, maybe it's due to a component which is owned by another team, right? And you always see like the dependency on this component. Maybe you should change the ownership of that component. And this is what I would call toxic dependency, right? It just do not help your organization to achieve a goal.
I saw that also several times, especially with startups that build on legacy code, and then a lot of time they start maybe with a real monolith, or it will get a monolithic structure, and there are so many interdependencies. And at some point, what I always hear or heard is that they want to then move into a more scalable approach, into microservices and so on, and then they break up certain code bases into services, and then usually this happens, what you just said, that some things cannot be solved.
Yeah. Like this is what I meant before, right? Like, so it's always a trade-off. So there's no ideal organization. You always need to understand, like what's the situation, right? Like what's the situation? What is the context? So what can you actually also afford? And for sure, right, the transition between like two architecture like concepts, so to say, that's really like this is probably one of the strongest changes you can do. Like for sure, right, this creates disturbance. So this is like there is no way around it, and that's why you should also clearly think about like how to approach such a change, right? Is it that you start with like new project in a new structure, or is it that you really want to transform like all the existing legacy applications? And there are different strategies around it, and maybe also one thing to share. So since I'm working like actually during all my jobs during the last 10 years, I dealt with a lot of like technical debt and legacy infrastructure or legacy systems. And like while they need to be improved, there's no question around that. Like you also see like that the wrong patterns get applied, right? If you talk about microservice architecture, right? So like the companies who made that famous, these companies are super large companies. So they probably have different problems than your company. So what I try to say with that is just because it works for one of the large tech companies, it doesn't necessarily need to work for your environment, right? So you need to be very like cautious about what to introduce and what not, and actually also how to introduce that.
Yeah, I think also from a hiring perspective, this is really crucial, because then sometimes when I think maybe a company like a big tech company. I think Meta was always really famous for some time. And when they introduced certain things, everybody wanted to do it that way. But maybe
absolutely
for that environment, and then you even make yourself or find yourself in a situation where you're not able to hire at scale or not even specific profiles because there's so many, I would say, hyped expectations in the mind of a leader or hiring managers or engineers that not even engineers that maybe could do the job could pass the evaluation because they're not that hyping the same thing. Did you also see something like that?
Yeah, like absolutely, right? I think on the one side you create wrong expectations, right? And in the other side you cannot actually afford it. So like let's maybe use maybe platform teams is one of the hot topics, right? Like not all, but a lot of companies like are currently building platform teams. Why? Because they want to centralize really cross-cutting concerns, right? They want to have like maybe provide a thin layer on top of AWS or any other cloud provider to make things easy, from building systems, deploying systems, running systems. And like this sounds like a good idea, but like this also creates the downside that you need to have a very powerful team to make that happen. And a lot of companies I'm talking with I know a bit, right? They cannot afford it. So it's very important, that you only go for things which you actually can also afford, right? Just saying, I want to have a platform team and then having maybe 2 or 3 people working on the platform and having 100 people who are dependent on that team, right? It's actually not a good idea.
Yeah. And do you also see that there is a relationship towards hierarchies? Because you also said that hierarchies are maybe not needed in the same way as initially.
Yeah, like if you look at hierarchies, like the reason why I tend not to use hierarchy so much is like because hierarchy are like a very old concept, right? It's not from the like age of information. It's more the industrial age, right? Where you clearly had the separation of really like thinking and acting, right? And like for these kind of industries, totally makes sense because like it's always the same. It's repetitive work. Sorry. But like if you look at the work we need to fulfill nowadays, right? It's knowledge work. So you need to be able to take your decisions. And that's why I think hierarchies, so classic hierarchies, they're a bit toxic. I'm not saying there is no need for hierarchies. There is definitely. So if you again think about systems, right? So I share that I like the idea of network, or I try to push the idea of network organization wherever I work. Still, like in these organizations, someone needs to work in a system, right? Look, so these are the teams, the individual contributor, and then you have people working on a system, right? So who assure, right, that the system has the right setup, meaning, right, the right people working in the team, the right processes, the right strategies, the right patterns, and so on and so on. And this is definitely something I would see for the classic hierarchies in regard to responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. And when you look into the different, let's say, attributes, what you would look for in teams that work on versus in the systems, do you see patterns there? What do you look for?
Yeah, I think you look for very different people, right? If we talk about really working in a system, these are the people like so individual contributors, like software engineers, infrastructure people, quality engineers, product people, UX, you name it, right? Everything you need actually like cross-functional. This is the idea of having a cross-functional teams, like everything you need to build a product, right? Or if we talk about organizations, right? A couple of these teams. And for sure, right, within these teams, there is no hierarchy. So this is a self-organized team. So everyone on the same level, not on the same level, but like part of a team, maybe on a different level in regard to really like career growth, right? So junior, professional, you name it. But within the organization, I would say it's all around knowledge and experience. Outside to the organization, maybe like go back. all around knowledge experience on a functional and technical level, right? So if you look outside the system, it's actually very, very different. It's not only about leadership. Maybe this is also important to share. Leadership also happens inside the system, right? So as a senior engineer or principal engineer, however you call this, right? You expect that these people, they share their experience, they help teams to take the right decision and so on, so on. For sure, this is also leadership. It's more lateral leadership. So the classic leadership you find outside the system, one of the most important jobs, for these, let's call them engineering managers, for sure, right? This is development of the talents of the people working in the system, for sure, right? So they have different skills, but this is not only limited to people management skills. You also need to have a good understanding of the system, right? So how software engineering works, what are trends, what kind of things we need to reflect in the strategy. So therefore, the profiles I would look are very, very different. What they both have in common, I would say, are soft skills. Right. So I think soft skills, they need to be the same for all areas. For sure, right? They are different across the levels, right? The higher it gets, the more your behavior should be a role model behavior. But if it comes to let's call them hard skills, I think they are very, very different.
Yeah. In case you like my show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. When you talked about the network organization,
True.
How do you define that in your own words? So what does it mean for you?
Yeah, you could also say hierarchy, or so classic hierarchy is some kind of network, because you have the boxes and then the connections between them. So network organization, if you think about I tend to say progressive tech orgs, or modern organizations. So they also exist of box and connections, but not on a hierarchy level. So not in a way that one box is telling the other what to do, right? It's more or less it shows the dependencies. So the boxes could be teams, but you could also apply that to different organizations. But in our regard, it is if we talk about tech, it's the boxes are teams, right? So cross-functional teams, and then you have connection between the teams, and they could be strong or they could be actually also weak. We talked about that before, right? Some could be toxic, some not. And it actually the connection just shows there is some kind of shared stake, right? It could be in one direction, other, it could be in both directions. But at the end, you have something like a living organization, so to say, right? Where you have a network, and this network actually also changes. For that reason, I think it's also the better approach for actually small companies, right? Because you don't know what you will do in the next half year, and running all the time reorganizations because your product vision changed, right? Or your business strategy changed. That's nonsense, right? You need to have a flexible approach. And if you think of a network, and inside a network, a loose structure of teams and collaboration between the teams, I think it's way easier to adapt it to new needs, rather than having reorganization, say you need to report to different people and so on and so on. We all know, right? This creates a lot of standstill, so to say.
Yeah. And also what I can imagine, what you can really see when you work in that way, that maybe the product itself is developed in a different way, also maybe from a code quality scalability perspective, than when you have it a bit more structured around a hierarchical approach. I think, right?
Yeah, there's this idea of Conway's law, right, which states that your products are so to say a mirror of your organizational structure. And I for sure, right? I think that's true. There's no way around that. If you have a core team, they will build core services. I think it's probably still the same with network organizations. Still, it's it's a loose structure, so you can easily adapt it. So I think it's it adds a lot of strengths, so capabilities to the organization, because you can adapt to new needs and do not need to ride the dead horse, so to say, right? Just because the structure is like it is, and like this person needs to have some direct reports, you keep that structure. So I think this kind of decoupling creates quite some capabilities for an organization.
And what role does a manager then have in a organization organized not that hierarchical?
Like what I shared before, like in regard to tech, let's say it could be an engineering manager, and like important to understand, an engineering manager is not a team lead, right? So a team lead is usually part of a team. So within a system, right? I said before, right? I distinguish between working in a system, working out a system. So like the engineering manager is outside the system, right? Therefore takes care for sure on the individual development of the people. I think that's still the same. It's a different approach because like the bandwidth of topics is different. And other than that, is really understanding the system, whatever you do, right? If it's a technical system, like because you apply that for software engineering, you should have an understanding how software engineering works, not down to the details, right? I'm not saying you should know how Kubernetes works at scale. I'm more or less saying like you need to understand like if a system is working well or not, right? You should have like good indicators if things go like in the right direction or not. So like having some KPIs, for example, DORA KPIs, to understand whether the subsystems, so the teams inside the systems, are doing a good job, or if you can improve that.
Yes.
DORA KPI, sorry. Yeah. DORA KPIs, like very famous KPIs, like in the tech world, to measure like, I would not say success of a team, also not efficiency. Still, probably efficiency meets it best, right? So it's not about like performance measurement of individual contributors in a team. It's more or less you want to understand what's the state of the team, right? So are they able to deliver frequently? Are they able to spot issues, right? Are they able to recover from a bad state fast? What's their uptime, stuff like that, right? So there are 4 KPIs, and there is a committee around that, and this committee is called DORA, DORA.
Okay, so maybe I need to look into that because
like very technical topic, but like this is one of the ideas, right? Like so, because at the end of the day, it should not be gut feeling. It's probably a mixture of everything, but like it should be like also like qualitative stuff, right? Not just like quantitative. No, it should be also quantitative, not just qualitative, right? So you have your gut feeling, you have an understanding, it works good, right? It feels like the team is really in a high performing mode, like dependency are on a low level, like it really like they have some kind of traction. However, right, you should also have some kind of quantitative metrics which actually show you, okay, like my gut feeling is right.
Definitely.
And this is like, sorry, I just want to say like this is the job. Like I think like I'm not saying like this is the organizational model for each and every organization, but like in our terms, like in our environment, that's the job of a manager, taking care of the system.
Therefore, I have maybe 1 or 2 more questions because I like the approach. And another question that just came up is when you see that there is, let's say, a way on how to measure efficiency in engineering on a technical perspective, do you also see that there is a way, maybe beside the classical Scrum methodologies with estimations and so on, that you can really manage the expectations well with the business side or the non-product development side? Because I think also within the product development circle, there is a certain level of dependencies, but then the next layer of abstraction is from the product development perspective as a whole system. If we zoom out again,
I
don't know, sales, customer support, finance, everything that is around that. What dependencies do you see there, and do you also see any frameworks on how to manage those?
Yeah, like maybe share some experience here. What I learned is that you should not force the outside organization, so like outside product tech, right? So like the business part, the sales part, like HR, whatever you mean. Like you should not force them to understand that organizational style, right? Because like it also creates some kind of like concerns, right? Wow, like they now separate like this, like the hierarchies from the technical responsibilities and so on and so on. So shall I apply this at our organization as well? I think it's just like, for me, like organization is just means to an end, right? You want to achieve something in the best way possible. Like that's why you have some kind of structures, and like you need to find the best structure for your challenge, so to say. In regard to like creating this kind of transparency, alignment throughout the organization, I think like network organization do not have a solution to that. Like I think they also not claiming to solve that. I think you need to have like processes around that. And maybe our engineering manager can spot that, right? So people working on the system spot that there is a lack, right? There's a lack of transparency. There's a lack of alignment. And then you maybe go to a drawing board and say, okay, like what is the problem? Or like I actually like to say, what's the situation? What's the problem? What's the solution to it? Really structuring it down and understand what kind of needs do I need to solve, right? And then maybe it's just transparency, maybe it's alignment, maybe it's like also cross roadmap prioritization. Some of the things actually you would like to avoid in such an environment, as I said before, right? Like this kind of network organization works best if you have as little dependencies between as possible, right? So you can go very fast with these organizations if you do it right.
And you could also argue that maybe the product management and plus engineering managers should also be the link to the outside of the organization to a certain extent, right?
Absolutely. You could say like in minister, aus minister, right? Like, so who's working inside and like who has the focus outside. Like I can tell you it's not easy. It's actually very different from the size of the company, also from the willingness to understand. As said before, right? Like this kind of progressive organization also questions, like, do we need to have hierarchies, right? And then people fear that and try everything to really not get in touch with that structure. But therefore, I would have something like I would use something like an interface in regard to like organizational interface, having some kind of rhythm, so meetings and so on, and like to really have like the connection between the system and the like rest of the company, so to say.
And do you see also, I don't know, best practices or patterns from your experience that there is a certain preference on a planning cadence? So on what time frame you look in product development, that you can also most accurately set expectations as well, what's possible, what not? And I think it also really depends on the situation, but...
Yeah, I think like this is like if you think of like who should answer that question, like it's definitely something that needs to be answered from in the system. Only the system itself knows what is possible and what is not. So it's nothing I could answer. It's also nothing like an engineering manager could answer, only the teams. So like, therefore you also need to have some kind of interaction between the business stakeholder or like the rest of the organization and the teams. And the only thing you could optimize for, and probably there is not that much what you can do, but like still you can try to optimize for, is like to have good estimations, right? But good estimations come with the downside that it takes time to do good estimations, because like, yes, we do like software engineering each and every day. Still, like the situation is always different. So therefore it's not repetitive work. Wow, strong, like difficult word. So it's always different. And therefore, right, you cannot say like the last story took us like 5 days, so the next story will take us 5 days again, right? Like, so especially all the estimations meetings, like their purpose is to create alignment, to create a shared understanding on the scope and what is needed for that. Having really good estimations like comes with the downside of have the need of investing time to really dig deep into the problem and understand what are the Fallstricke, like what are like the issues we will probably face, right?
Yeah, because this is what I saw, especially when venture capital comes into play, where you always need to deliver everything fast. And now, then they're dependent
Yes, you cannot.
on launching new markets or so on, right? And then you're dependent on engineering because they need to ship a feature and you need to market it and so on. This can get then complicated.
And let's be honest, right? Like, I think I understand this fully, right? So I worked a lot with peers on the business side. So I get this I get there where this is coming from. On the other side, we all know this is wishful thinking. Like, just based on the of lines of text and some ideas, like, you cannot say it's probably 280 days. Like, so there's like the larger, the higher the deviation. That's for sure. However, and maybe this is a benefit of such network organizations, is if you do it right, you have a setup which allows you to really go full force with one team without affecting the others. Which means like let's take your case, right? VC comes in and says, I want to have that feature. Hopefully your organization is, or maybe your organization is already capable fulfilling this request without stopping like the entire product development, like reshuffling everything and then starting just to deliver that feature. Maybe you are already in a shape that you can deliver that without that many dependencies, right? So I think that could be a benefit of such an organization. And the second is, if you're not in that shape and you strongly believe like this is the way to go, you could also not easily, but at least with less effort, adapt the organization. So that's definitely a strong argument for such organizational styles.
In case you have any feedback or anything you want to share with me, please send me an email on thomas@peoplewise.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. And in case you really enjoy the show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Another question what I wanted to ask previously. The network organization approach, what role would maybe a VP of engineering or a VP of product also maybe play there, or you as a CTO? Do you see that you also have a different role there, or do you need different layers of middle management?
Yeah, first of all, as I said before, there are still hierarchies, right? So like it's just not the main structure, right? On an operational, so you have like a different structure to do your operational work. Still, like there are some tasks which are still there and where classic hierarchies make sense, right? So if you talk about salary increase or development, right? So like individual development, for sure, right? Classic structures, they make sense for that. Therefore, also like roles still have some similarities. However, and this is important to understand, like if you think of again, the system with the different, with the split on working in a system, working on a system, like all managers, doesn't matter whether it's VP engineering, VP product, VP or CTO, right, or CPO, right, is only working on a system. And then you need to ask yourself, so what are the ingredients for an organization? Like as I said before, right, it's the right setup, it's the right processes and strategy. And so then you can think, okay, what can I do? What can I deliver best, right? And as a CTO, CPO, it's probably strategy, which actually, and this is also one of the things I saw very, very often in my career, that people are working on a different or on the wrong level, right? So CPOs or also VP engineering really working their hands off, right? Being they still individual contributing to a certain product, which I think it's wrong, because then you also move the organization in a direction where people believe, okay, the VP product, they need to write user stories, and they're also checking the acceptance criteria. And maybe this is true for a startup. That's why I said my sweet spot is in a bit larger organization. But in at a certain size, you need to have clear responsibilities, right? Otherwise, you end up in chaos. So there needs to be a clear responsibility, who's doing what. And within the system, this is operational work. And outside the system, this gives direction and ensures the system has the best possible setup. And this actually also creates quite some freedom.
I can agree. And I totally agree on what you just say. But I also think that when you look at the early stage, sometimes you don't even need engineering leadership or a CTO. It's just maybe
absolutely
a bunch of engineers that really do the job and try to get it done.
Yeah, which is actually also a good, like, this is a good argument why, like, maybe structures, so hierarchy structures are not as important anymore, right? So if you start in small, right, there is no one like overseeing everything. Why? Because that's literally not possible with knowledge work, right? You maybe have the core engineer or the core developer, right? We all know this person, like, who is like factor X and is able to provide a lot of functionality in short time. But like, this person should also not necessarily be the manager in the future, right? So there should be a clear separation between like this functional work, so operational work, and disciplinary work.
Yeah. Cool, André. And what is a guest that I should maybe interview next that you know, but I don't know yet?
Since I like people like who challenge the status quo and also my status quo and my beliefs, there is like a former colleague, actually, like a colleague I've worked before at Immobilien Scout. His name is Stefan Schmidt. He is like, he was also CTO from quite some companies, and now is doing consulting, is running his consulting business called Amazing CTO. So he is probably even more progressive when it comes to organization than I am.
Yeah, cool. Do you think he's open for an episode?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Will you connect us?
Absolutely. I will do this. Like, next task on my list for sure. Promised.
Cool, André. Hey, it was really nice that we had the time and the insights from your side, and thanks for also engaging actively on LinkedIn and having all these discussions. I really enjoyed, and I think I can also really take a lot out of it, and also the listeners. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.